Good afternoon, Oakview DC friends. Miss Lorraine here with Oakview DC Storytime number 5. And it is now April. It's actually Monday, April 6th. So now that we are in the month of April, I'm going to start reading some books that are on a variety of topics related to the month of April. So, of course, in April we are experiencing spring. So, some of the books that I read may be about spring or about growing things, the outside world. Also, in the month of April, I believe this year it is April 22nd, is Earth Day. So, I will probably read some books this month related to the environment, the planet, taking better care of our Earth, which we could certainly use every possible reminder to do. So, my calendar at home says that this is Celebrate Diversity Month, which I'm thrilled about. So we will read some books of stories and characters that are from diverse backgrounds, and that will also kind of give you a sneak preview into the curriculum topic for this summer program, if we are able to have a regular summer program this year with DC. If we're not, hopefully we can still modify this curriculum in some way so that we can still use it, because I'm really excited about it. It is, the curriculum for this summer is related to diversity. It is a global type thing. So I'm going to give you some little sneak peeks, some little Easter eggs, since this month is also the month in which Easter, the holiday Easter, is contained. Some Easter eggs to some future topics we will be discussing. And apparently this month is also, I have seen on the internet a few places, it is also Arab American Heritage Month. I did not know that, but that works well as into the Celebrate Diversity topic as well. So I have a few books I can share with you that are related to Arab Americans or Middle Eastern Americans. A couple of them are actually about people in Afghanistan, which is technically not the Middle East. It's actually Central Asia. My oldest daughter and I go round and round on that. But geographically speaking, it's Central Asia, and also culturally speaking, I feel that I could be wrong. Please do not quote me here. And if you are watching this, and if you are from Afghanistan, or your family background is from Afghanistan, please feel free to correct me if I am wrong. But my understanding from the Afghan people that I have known is that they don't really consider themselves to be Middle Eastern or Arab. That's like a separate culture as far as they're concerned. Their culture is more related to Persian culture and Central and South Asian cultures, I think. That's my understanding. So anyway, moving on, we're going to read one book today that kind of get us into the spirit of traveling and exploring the world and enjoying our beautiful planet, but it still ties in with last month's theme, which was women's history, because this is a partially true, partially false story. It's based on a true story of a woman who actually existed, whose name was Mary Kingsley. She was a British citizen in the 1800s, and she, well, actually early 1900s, yeah, late 1800s, early 1900s. Being a woman, during that time it wasn't very common for women to travel to foreign places unless they were accompanied by, a man, and certainly not of their own accord to go on adventures traveling around the world, but that is what she chose to do. The story is called Uncommon Traveler, and DC friends, you may notice that this is actually one of our books. You might recognize this here. Yes, I was able to stop by the classroom on Friday, Miss Roberta and I both, and we picked up some things that we wanted to keep for right now in our homes to work with you guys on. So I grabbed a few books. among other things. So I grabbed this one. It's called Uncommon Traveler, Mary Kingsley in Africa. And it is written and illustrated both by Don Brown. So remember, this is based on a true story, but it's a little bit fictionalized as well. So, in 1870, a small house stood on a lonely lane outside London, England. Bricks filled nearly all of the front windows. Shutters blocked the back windows. Vines choked the back wall. Gloom ruled the rooms. 8-year-old Mary Kingsley lived there. It was as if she lived alone. So here's a picture, and it does certainly look quite gloomy, doesn't it? Does not look like a very cheerful house. The weather and the house look very gray, very melancholy looking. Little tiny girl in the middle of all that. Her father, George, traveled the world seeking adventure. Her mother, also named Mary, was sickly and rarely left her bed. Her youngest brother, Charles, was away at school. Mary didn't go to school and would never go to school, as was common during this time period. The whole of my childhood and youth was spent at home in the house and garden, she later said. The living outside world I saw little of. I felt out of place at the few parties I ever had the chance of going to, for I knew nothing of play and such things. And I feel like this was a good choice too, because maybe some of you friends can relate to that right now. You may be feeling rather isolated and cut off from your friends, and like you're spending all of your time indoors. So, but at least your whole life is not lived that way, right? This is just a temporary thing for us. Still, Mary was happy. I had a great amusing world of my own. The books in Father's library. See, books can take you to a whole other world. Novels and poetry books, science and history books, travel and adventure books. Books were her companions and teachers. So she never got to go to school. Like you guys have all gotten to go to an actual physical school. She never got to go to school. And in fact, in the biography section of the book where it's talking about her factually, it's not known how she ever learned to read or write. She apparently taught herself because she never had a tutor, never went to school, and her mother was too sickly to do this. But there was a life beyond the library, and Mary was a dutiful daughter. She nursed her mother, she tidied the house, she helped her father during his few visits. George Kingsley wrote about his travels, and Mary happily uncovered facts he needed from her beloved library. She knew to be quiet and make little fuss or risk George's temper and have a book thrown at her. Wow. So the few times when her dad comes home to visit, he's got a bit of a temper. Apparently throws books at her. And yet she's still a dutiful daughter, as it says, and does what she can to help both of her parents. She was the family's handyman, too. Mary taught herself home repair by reading English Mechanic magazine. Once a leaky pipe needed mending. Standing on a box beneath it, she thought, I will cut the lead pipe gallantly through. Mary recalled, but Mary forgot to turn off the water. Swish came out a jet of water that knocked me over, box and all. So there she's trying to repair the pipe and forgot to turn off the water main, so. Yeah. But at least she was trying, right? In those days, you didn't have a repairman you could just call up to come take care of it for you. She had other repairs, other odd jobs, and other chores to do. Mary's narrow life as handyman, nursemaid, servant, and aide went on for days, weeks, and years. Childhood ended, youth disappeared. In 1892, her mother and father both died. For the first time in her life, good daughter Mary Kingsley was free of her duties. She was 30 years old. Wow. So you guys, can you imagine that? Not only did she spend her entire childhood basically alone in this house with her mom that she just took care of, and occasionally her dad, who would come home on his infrequent visits. And the rest of the time it was just her, and she had a lot of duties and responsibilities that were more like, today what adults would take care of, not what children would do. And yet she took care of all that stuff. And she continued to do so even after she was technically an adult. She didn't move out like many girls her age. When she became like 18, she probably would have been looking for a husband. And apparently she didn't do that either. She stayed home to take care of her mom and continued to maintain the house for when her dad stopped by. And she did that for another 12 years, until she was 30, which in those days, 30 was considered getting kind of older, and definitely past marrying age. So she basically gave up her life for her parents. But now that she's 30, she has a chance to do something else. They've both passed away. She doesn't have obligations to anything else. She doesn't have a husband or any children. So, something new has happened. Her world has changed. Her world, once cramped and dark, was now big as the globe. The idea of it made her head spin. Inspired by her father's journeys and the travel books that she loved, Mary had the remarkable notion of going to West Africa. People thought Mary was foolish. Much of West Africa was a mystery, even to those who lived there. Visitors risked disease, wild animal attacks, and the hostility of some Africans. West Africa was not a place for a single woman to visit. But Mary ignored the warnings and planned her trip. She would travel light, without a tent, eating native food and wearing her regular English clothes. She would trudge, wade, clamber, and climb in a high-necked, long-sleeved shirt, long heavy skirt, and proper Victorian boots. She arrived in West Africa in 1893. Mary was delighted. Oh, the grand and vivid sights, sounds, and smells she met. So, here you can see her plane coming in, and she's traveling to a world that is completely different than what she's grown up in. The England that she grew up in is rather gray and dreary, and she lived in London, which was a large urban city environment. Now she's traveling to West Africa, where the majority of people are living in villages and smaller homes, and it's very colorful and bright. People are wearing very colorful clothing. She ignored the scorching heat and the soggy air and the odd insects. One looked like a flying lobster. Another, an enormous beetle, flopped into a soup plate and then shook itself dry like a retriever. She collected insects and freshwater fish, which she later donated to the British Museum of Natural History. There, she's dealing with all the flies and other flying insects that can be found in some parts of Africa. Of course, Mary encountered creatures bigger than fish and insects. When Mary explored a riverbank, a hippo blocked her way. I scratched him behind the ear with my umbrella, and we parted on good terms, she said. Very brave. Maybe not the smartest thing to do, but very brave. Hippos are actually incredibly dangerous animals, and today now account for the majority of people who are killed accidentally by animals in Africa by hippos, surprisingly. Many people might think lions or crocodiles because they've got big teeth, they're predators. It's actually hippos. Hippos do have massive teeth too, and they have terrible tempers, and they're very territorial. So it means they get really upset when anybody comes in their part of the river, and that includes people. In a swamp, an 8-foot-long crocodile chose to get his front paws over the stern of my canoe, said Mary. I had to retire to the bow to keep the balance and fetch him a clip on the snout with a paddle. This was only a pushing young creature who had not learned manners. So look at that. She's battling with a crocodile with her canoe paddle, just smacking him on the nose. Not afraid at all. She just said he hadn't learned any manners. You see, even though she grew up in a very sheltered environment, she appears not to have had any fear. Unfazed by the wild beasts, rough country, and terrific heat, Mary pushed further inland and met the people who dwelled there. Once a trek up a steep hill provided a surprise meeting with some of them. I slipped, slid, and finally fell plumb through the roof of an unprotected hut, Mary recalls. A great hubbub followed, and she paid for the damage she had done. She slipped down the side of a hill and landed on top of somebody's hut roof and broke it. So she had to pay. But, that's the responsible thing to do. Mary met members of the Jumba, Igalwa, and Mapungwe tribes. I don't know if I'm still saying those right. I apologize if I'm not. But she felt a special closeness to the Fang people. She admired them greatly. The Fang is full of fire, temper, intelligence, and go, she said. Filled with fire, temper, intelligence, and go herself, Mary was drawn deeper into West Africa. A paddle wheeler carried Mary more than 100 miles up the Oakview River. I don't know if I said that right either. There she gathered guides and boarded a canoe. The river was treacherous. She and her guides often crashed into boulders or spun wildly in whirlpools and had to leap for their lives. Wow. She's having some crazy adventures there, meeting a lot of native peoples. I do have one family, actually, who comes from Nigeria in our DC. Hello to my family friends from Nigeria. So if my mom would like to correct me on any of my pronunciation, please feel free. Let me know. Maybe you know how to say these names better than I do, most likely. Mary then plunged into the uncharted forest toward the Rambouillet River. It was a wild trek. The forest canopy hid the sky, thick vines roped the leaves. The great blossoms dotted the forest floor in glorious cups of orange and crimson and pure white. There she's going through the forest. And the forest in Africa is considered some of the densest and most difficult rainforest to trek in the world. So most people, in the United States are well aware familiar with the Amazon rainforest in South America. But not as many people, I don't think, are as aware of the massive, massive tracts of rainforest that exist in the heart of Africa. Part of it's in Congo. The Congo rainforest is part of it. But it's huge, it's extremely dense, and a lot of it has never been explored. I don't know that there are any tribes that have never been contacted there, as there are in the Amazon. But certainly, if there are people living there, they probably haven't been contacted by many people because it's very, very difficult to get through this terrain. And yet, Mary is doing so. And Mary and her guides struggled over a hill covered with broken trees felled by a great storm. The hot, wet air blanketed them like a weight. So I've never been to Africa before, and I've read and heard that it is even much more than, like, say, the Caribbean. But I have been to the Caribbean before, and to several tropical places in the Caribbean. And the heat is not like heat we have here. So if you have never been to the Caribbean or to, like, Texas, somewhere in the southern Midwest, you may not have ever experienced the kind of overwhelming, like, oppressive wet heat that can occur in the tropics. It's not like here. Elephants, gorillas, and velvety skinned snakes cross their path. And of course, there's a lot of wild creatures that you can see there that you cannot see here either. Or in England, for that matter. They stopped for the night at a Fong village. Mosquitoes and lice kept Mary awake. Restless, she borrowed a canoe and slid into the nearby lake. All was purple-black. Only the stars and glowworms twinkled. Silver-white fish sprang from the water, reminding Mary of flashing swords. She paddled to a far bank, stepped onto the shore, and discovered she wasn't alone. I felt the earth quiver under my feet, and I heard a soft, big, sawing sound, and looked around, and I saw I had dropped in on a hippo banquet. Mary said. I made out 5 of the immense brutes around me, so I softly returned to the canoe and shoved off. Good idea. She bathed in the lake, returned to camp just before dawn, and continued on. So there she is, accidentally coming across a whole group of hippos in the river. Not a good idea. It's definitely a good idea for her to turn around quietly and leave. Once she stumbled into a spike-filled pit used to trap animals and narrowly escaped harm. It is at these times that you realize the blessings of a good thick skirt, she observed. Indeed. Wow. A slippery log bridged a ravine, and Mary walked on it like a tightrope. So one has to wonder, how she came across the ability to deal with all these different things in her path, these adversities, these obstacles, because she had very little experience in her youth with dealing with anything much out of the house. So it's amazing that she was able to handle all these various issues in her adventures. Mary and her group plodded through sun-cooked swamps of ink-black slime. The stench was awful. Flies pestered them. Sometimes they sank up to their necks in the filthy water. Ugh. Can you imagine that? Wading through swamp water up to your neck. They finally emerged from the swamps and reached the mud banks of the Rambouillet River, to the great mighty surprise of nearby villagers. A noisy crowd soon surrounded them. Mary's journey up the Oakview River and across the forest to the Rambouillet River was a great feat, but she didn't crow. She called it a mere picnic. Picnic or not, West Africa tugged at Mary. If I have a heaven, she said, that will be mine. So imagine she came from a world completely different, London, England, than West Africa, and yet she considered this her true home, her true heaven. Mary returned to England, where she wrote about Africa and talked about Africa. Thousands of people read her books and listened to her lectures. They were astonished that a woman had experienced such adventures. She found fame, for which she didn't care for a hairpin. She wasn't worried about fame. She still had few friends and felt out of place at parties. Mary filled her apartment with African masks and charms, baskets and sculptures. She kept the rooms hot and humid, and reminding her of Africa. To remind her of Africa, to remind her of home. So that's the last page. So she found her true home thousands of miles away across the globe in a completely different place from where she'd grown up. And so there's the cover of the book again. And so I hope you enjoyed that one. And that might inspire you to go on adventures of your own. Right now, of course, they have to be virtual adventures for the most part, through books, through videos on YouTube or other online resources, through movies and TV, streaming sources that we have available to us. We can check out other places in the world. Even on your parents' phone, if you get their permission, or on your own phone or tablet, if you have one, you can check out Google Earth. That's always fun. I enjoy looking at the satellite images. You can zoom in very, very close on some towns and cities, thousands of miles away, and see what it might look like for people who are living there. So yeah, so in the next few days, if the weather's not so great outside, I think it's going to continue raining. Cuddle up with a good book, enjoy some virtual adventures, and I will see you here again for the next video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you are one of my Oakview DC friends, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell, so then you'll get all of the videos whenever they are uploaded. And that way I'll also know that you are seeing them. Okay, everybody, take care, stay healthy, remember, stay calm, keep meditating, and love your family. Enjoy this time that you have together. And I'll see you in the next one.